A cry pierces the scorched Arizona desert of 1876, stirring Hank Mercer, a former cavalryman haunted by a village burned to ash. Once a soldier, now a drifter, he carries the guilt of turning away when flames devoured Apache lives. That faint wail, fragile yet fierce, pulls him toward two Apache girls and a debt he never meant to owe. Will this broken man find redemption in the sands, or will his past bury him under the weight of old sins? Subscribe now to follow Hank's journey and share in the comments where you're listening from. What secrets hide in the dust? Stay tuned to uncover the fire that might forge a new beginning. The Arizona sun of 1876 blazed like a furnace, scorching the cracked earth and bleaching bones half buried in red dust. Vultures wheeled overhead, their shadows slicing across the endless scrub. Hank Mercer rode slowly, his mare's hooves kicking up grit that stung his weathered face. A former cavalryman, he was now just a cowhand, drifting through a land as unforgiving as his memories. The village burned years ago. Apache screams, flames licking the sky, still haunted him. He'd turned his back then, spurs digging into his horse, and left a piece of himself in the ashes. His daughter's face, lost to fever, flickered in his mind, her laughter drowned by those screams. Dust coated his throat, and the canteen at his hip sloshed low. Hank's hand rested on the worn grip of his rifle, eyes scanning the horizon. The desert was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that hid teeth. A sound cut through it, thin, sharp, like a thread snapping in the wind. A cry, human and desperate. Hank froze, his mare snorting, ears twitching. Another wail, fainter now, pulled him toward a cluster of boulders jutting from the earth, like broken ribs. His pulse quickened, not with fear, but with something raw, a ghost of his daughter calling from the dark. He swung down, boots crunching on gravel, and tethered the mare to a stunted mesquite. Rifle in hand, he moved low, shadow blending with the rocks. The cry came again, guiding him to a narrow gash between two boulders. There, pressed against stone, were two Apache girls, no older than 7. The older one, her braid frayed, shielded the younger, whose eyes gleamed with terror. A pack of coyotes circled, their teeth bared, eyes glinting like embers in the noon light. Hank saw his daughter again, her small hands clutching her mother's skirt as fever took her. His jaw tightened, shoving the memory down. No time for ghosts. He stepped forward, deliberate, rifle raised. The lead coyote growled, a low rumble of hunger. Hank's shot cracked, splitting the desert silence. The beast yelped, blood blooming on its flank, and fell. The others scattered, their howls fading into the heat. The girls flinched, their breaths ragged, eyes darting from the dead coyote to the stranger. Hank lowered the rifle, crouching to seem less like a threat. "You're safe now," he said, voice rough as sand, steady as iron. The older girl's grip on her sister eased, but her stare held fire, daring him to prove his words. He pulled his canteen, offering it. The older girl hesitated, then took it, letting the younger drink first. Water dribbled down the little one's chin, her hands trembling in torn deerskin. Their faces were gaunt, smudged with dirt, hunger or fear, carving hollows under their eyes. Hank shrugged off his duster, its leather heavy with sweat and dust, and draped it over them. The older girl clutched it tight, her chin lifting like she'd fight him for it. A spark of respect flickered in Hank's chest. She had grit, like the desert itself. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth. Hank's abandoned Pony Express station, half swallowed by sand, lay a half-mile off, its sagging walls a frail promise of shelter. "Come on," he said, nodding toward the trail. The girls followed, silent, the younger one's fingers brushing his sleeve, clinging like she feared the wind might steal him. The older girl walked proudly, her steps light but sure, leaving faint prints in the dust. Hank kept his rifle ready, eyes scanning for more threats. Coyotes, bandits, or worse. The desert didn't care which. His mind drifted to that burning village, the night he rode away, leaving families to die. These girls weren't his, but their fear was a mirror, reflecting a debt he'd never pay. He shook it off, focusing on the path. The station's outline emerged, a crumbling relic against the red horizon. Its chimney sagged, but it'd hold heat. Inside, he'd build a fire, share what little he had. The girl's footsteps echoed his, a rhythm against the desert's hum. Whatever waited beyond those walls, beast, man, or memory, Hank knew one thing. He'd drawn a line in the sand. For now, these girls were his to protect. The Pony Express station's walls groaned under the weight of the Arizona sun, its splintered boards baked brittle by noon. Inside, Hank fed the fire with mesquite scraps, the flames spitting sparks that danced across the dirt floor. Awi and Tiva sat close, their small hands clutching cornbread crumbs, eyes tracking every shadow. The desert's heat pressed through the cracks, but it was the silence that gnawed at Hank. Thick, heavy, like the air before a storm. He saw the girl's fear, sharp as a blade, and it cut deeper than the guilt of that burned Apache village. He'd brought them here, but safety was a promise the frontier rarely kept. Night fell, the sky a bruised purple beyond the sagging roof. Hank sat by the door, rifle across his knees, listening to the desert's low hum. Awi ate fast, her gaze hard, while Tiva nibbled, her fingers tracing the duster's frayed hem. The fire's glow painted their faces, softening the hunger in their cheeks. Hank's thoughts drifted to the coyote's blood on the sand, a marker of a debt he'd taken on. He stirred the coals, the crackle drowning out memories of screams he couldn't unhear. Sleep was a stranger, but the girl's steady breaths kept him anchored. Dawn broke, harsh and red, dust swirling like smoke on the horizon. A figure emerged, striding through the haze. A woman, her braid tight, a hawk feather catching the light. Nayoli, their mother, her face etched with grief and grit. She dropped to her knees, arms wrapping Awi and Tiva, her shoulders shaking but her eyes unyielding, like obsidian under the sun. Hank stood back, the heat stinging his neck, feeling like a trespasser on a moment too raw. Nayeli rose, her daughters clinging to her skirt, and fixed him with a stare that weighed his soul. "You gave me back my blood," she said, her English halting, each word carved from stone. "I owe you my life." Hank's throat tightened. He saw the village flames in her gaze, knew she'd marked him as cavalry, one of the butchers. "No debt," he muttered, turning to the fire. But Nayeli's voice cut through, sharp as a flint. "A life saved is a life owed." Her words hung heavy, a vow he couldn't shake. He grabbed a shovel, trudging to the coyote's corpse outside, and dug a shallow grave in the hard earth. Nayeli watched, silent, as he scratched an Apache symbol into a flat stone, her nod faint but real. The act didn't erase his past, but it shifted something in her eyes, a crack in the wall of hate. The desert held its breath, but peace was a lie. Hooves thundered, faint at first, then sharp, kicking up clouds of red dust. 3 riders burst from the haze, Cole, Amos, and Barrett, men from Hank's cavalry days, their faces hard as the iron on their hips. "Heard you're keeping savages, Mercer," Cole spat, his grin cruel. "Hand 'em over. Army pays good for strays." Hank stepped forward, rifle steady, the sun burning his back. "My land, my call," he growled, voice low, a warning coiled tight. Nayeli moved beside him, her knife glinting, Awi clutching Tiva behind her. The air snapped taut. Amos drew his pistol, flashing, but Hank was faster. His shot roared, catching Amos in the shoulder. He fell, cursing, blood soaking the sand. Cole lunged, but Nayeli's knife slashed his arm, a red line blooming. Barrett wheeled his horse, spitting threats as they fled, their dust trail a promise of return. Hank's chest heaved, the rifle hot in his hands. Nayeli stood firm, her blade still drawn, eyes blazing with a mother's steel. Awi handed Hank a strip of cloth, her small fingers steady, a silent trust forged in the fight. Hank dragged Amos's gear to the grave, burying it with the coyote, another Apache mark scratched in stone. The desert watched, indifferent. If this tale's pulling you in, folks, hit that subscribe button to ride with us. Drop your city in the comments. Love knowing where these stories land. Nayeli's gaze lingered on Hank, softer now, but the horizon stirred with dust. The riders would return, and the desert never forgave. What shadows chased Nayeli, and what price would her debt demand? Stay with me, because the storm's just rising. The dust settled, but the horizon held its breath, as if the desert knew more blood was coming. Hank stood watch at the Pony Express station, the night air sharp with the scent of sage and scorched earth. Inside, the fire's glow flickered across Awi and Tiva's faces, their small forms huddled under Nayeli's blanket. The fight with the riders had carved a fragile trust, but the desert's claws were never far. Hank's grip on his rifle tightened, his eyes tracing the dark beyond the cracked window, where the threat of Cole and Barrett's return loomed like a storm cloud over the Arizona sands. Dawn broke, painting the sky in streaks of fire. The station's walls creaked, the heat already rising, baking the air thick. Nayeli swept the dirt floor, her movements sure, claiming the space as if it were more than a ruin. Awi trailed Hank outside, carrying kindling, her eyes sharp, learning his rhythm as he chopped wood. Tiva clung to Nayeli, clutching a wooden knife Hank had whittled, its edges smoothed by her small fingers. The desert's hum was softer now, but Hank felt its pulse, a warning in the stillness. He taught Awi to stack tinder, her hand steady, mimicking his precision. Nayeli's low Apache lullaby drifted through the open door, weaving a thread of calm through the heat. Days passed, each one stitching the four closer. Nayeli mended Hank's torn shirt, her needle flashing in the firelight, each stitch a quiet defiance of the desert's wear. Tiva traced stories in the dust, her giggles a rebellion against the silence. Awi practiced loading the rifle, her small frame taut with focus, guided by Hank's steady voice. The station, once a husk, began to breathe, its walls holding not just heat, but life. Hank felt it in the weight of Nayeli's glance, the way Awi's shoulders squared, Tiva's laughter easing the ache of his daughter's ghost. But the desert didn't forgive, and peace was a guest that never stayed. By noon, the sky churned red, a sandstorm brewing like a beast waking. Hooves thundered, louder than before, a dozen riders cutting through the haze. At their head was Vaughn, a scar-faced man from Hank's past, the one who'd ordered the Apache village burned. His eyes glinted, hungry for Nayeli, believing she held a map to her surviving kin. "Hand her over, Mercer," he snarled, "or we burn this place to ash." Hank stepped onto the porch, rifle ready, the sun searing his neck. Nayeli stood beside him, her knife drawn, Awi and Tiva behind her, their faces set like stone. The storm hit, sand stinging like needles, blinding the riders. Shots cracked, spitting fire through the dust. Hank fired, dropping one man, his body swallowed by the red haze. Nayeli moved like a shadow, her blade catching a rider's arm, blood mixing with sand. Awi, remembering Hank's lessons, darted to the woodpile, lighting a torch and hurling it into a stack of dry straw. Flames roared, smoke choking the air, scattering the horses. Vaughn charged, his pistol raised, but Hank tackled him, the two rolling in the dirt, fists and grit flying. Nayeli pulled Tiva to safety, her shouts guiding Awi back through the chaos. Hank pinned Vaughn, the man's scar twisting as he begged for mercy. Hank's fist hovered, his daughter's face flashing. Not vengeance, but justice. He stood, letting Vaughn crawl away, the desert to judge him. The riders fled, their shapes fading into the storm, leaving the station smoldering but standing. Hank dragged the fallen to a shallow grave, carving Apache symbols into stones. Nayeli's nod a silent approval. The fire's ashes drifted, coating the ground like snow. Nayeli touched Hank's shoulder, her hand steady, her voice low. The debt is paid. We live for tomorrow. Hank nodded, the horizon blurring in the dying storm. The station's charred walls held firm, a sanctuary forged in blood and fire. Awi and Tiva sat by the hearth, their hands linked, faces lit by the glow. The desert stretched endlessly, but inside, the silence was alive. Not loss, but a promise. Hank's scars didn't fade, but they carried a new weight. A home, stitched from ash, where tomorrow wasn't a curse but a vow. The Arizona desert of 1876 fades, but Hank's journey lingers, his scars woven into a fragile home born from ash. What stirred you most, his stand against the past, or Nayeli's unyielding strength? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know where this tale found you. Your city or corner of the world. Your reflections breathe life into these frontier stories, and I'm grateful you rode along. What shadows will the desert cast next? Stay tuned for more tales where the wilds test the heart. Until we meet again, keep the fire burning.